Hey, AP Bio students. Wanted to give you a quick introduction. This should not be a long video, but wanted to get us ready to tackle cell respiration tomorrow. And so here's my little watch for falling hydrogens and electrons. So I pulled, maybe you've seen this on the side of the road, the signs of caution for falling rocks. So watch for the falling hydrogens. And that's just a reminder that what we're looking at are the changes in energy in our electrons, in our molecules. And so in our last video, we looked at the redox reactions and we learned that it didn't have to completely lose or gain electrons. So you want to keep in mind that it takes energy to pull away an electron from an atom. So if that's true, if it does take energy to pull it away from an atom, as they then shift closer to the atom, that means you're losing energy. So you want to think about it. Maybe this diagram may help you. So imagine a hill, and you're pulling a rock, a big rock, up the hill. And so I think it's quite intuitive to think, okay, well, I need to exert energy to pull this rock up from the ground. And if I let go of it, that rock is going to naturally fall down to its lower energy state. So you can imagine if you've got a molecule where the electron is farther away, that means that that takes a lot of energy. And as it falls closer to the atom, that now means that it has lower energy. Now, what you're going to notice in our equation is that as the electrons are taken away and stripped, as we go from glucose to then carbon dioxide, we're going to see that shift in energy. So keep that in mind. So watch for following hydrogens and electrons. Now, there's a little molecule that we need to be introduced to, and this is called NAD or NADH. And as it's in well, let's practice here, guys. It's in a positive state. That means it's lost an electron. So as it's lost an electron, that means it's, okay, you should have picked oxidized. So this is its oxidized form. And if I zoom in on this, you should be able to notice here's our little positive sign there. Now, this is where you might remember some things from biology days. NADH or NAD, it serves a very humble function. It's a little dump truck. And I probably drew that wrong. Some of you who may have grown up loving trucks as a kid, maybe you might be, that doesn't look like a dump truck. Okay, well, too bad. So here's our NAD. And NAD positive, what can happen is as it loads up with hydrogens and electrons, that's going to change to NADH. So here it is gaining an electron. So once it gains an electron, it is reduced. So here it is as it's gaining an electron. So now the question you should be thinking to yourself is, where in the world is this hydrogen coming from? Where in the world is the electron coming from? But once that happens, it now loses that positive charge. We now add a hydrogen to that, and it's become a carrier. So it is an electron and hydrogen carrier. And what we really want to focus on is it's a high energy electron. As you're stripping it from someplace, this has a little bundle of energy because you've messed about with those bonds. So as it becomes NADH, it's going to take it somewhere. It's going to dump, just like a dump truck should. It's going to dump that electron and proton there, and then it's going to swing back around and get some more, and then it just cycles that way. Now, the other thing I want you, and again, if you had me for biology, you might remember this. Bear with me because it's going to seem a little weird to draw at first, but I want you to think about a dam. So maybe you're driving over a dam. You look on the one side and you see that there is a lot of water on the one side. And then on the other side, it's quite low. Now, you've learned about hydroelectric power dams, and it comes as no surprise to you that if I said, let's poke a hole or put a pipe through this dam, I don't think it would take any brain power to think about the fact that we know that water is going to come pouring out here. And now, you understand from previous classes that this has a lot of potential energy, and then as it's falling, we're seeing a change into kinetic energy. So much so that you've probably learned that they can put these little turbines in a very elaborate system that can now use that kinetic energy to power this turbine to generate electricity. Now, what I want you to be thinking about, and hopefully this is sparking some memories. Like I said, if you had me, I use the same diagram. It really helps you prime for what's coming. What I want you to be thinking about is there anything that we have learned that serves as a barrier, like the dam does, in the cell? And I want you to be thinking, well, have we learned about anything that has a lot of something on one side and not a lot of something on the other side? And hopefully there might be a part of you that's like, oh, of course. A lot of something on one side and a lot of something and a less amount on the other side. And is there anything that we've learned about that lets things go through that barrier? And if you can think of maybe three possibilities for that, what is our barrier that we've learned about from cells? What is our barrier? What's the process of going from an area that has a lot of something to an area that's low? And then have we learned about anything that lets things through that barrier? Now, maybe your mind is racing at this point, or maybe not. It is at nighttime, so I get it. But what we haven't figured out is, well, are we talking about water? I mean, I did say this is like a nice image to have. So if it's not water, then what is this stuff? And then we're certainly not talking about electricity. So instead of electricity, what are we converting? So that's what we're going to look at. That's going to give you a nice little primer for this. And then we're just going to leave with the basics. So this is going to help us hit the ground running tomorrow. So we know the equation for cell respiration. Glucose in the presence of oxygen, it's oxidized into carbon dioxide and water. Now, what we're going to get from this is a whole bunch of energy in the form of ATP molecules. That's what we want. Now, this is something that you should know. Whether or not it's by heart or not, you should have a sense of, if they gave you something, gave you an equation, you should have a sense of, oh, that's glucose. Okay, so that better be respiration. We're taking glucose and breaking it down. And just by the way, animals respire, but so do plants. Plants have mitochondria. They do undergo cell respiration. It's just that whereas we have to get our food from other organisms, which make us a heterotrophic organism, which that means we have to eat other organisms for our energy, for our food and energy. Plants are autotrophic, which means they can happily sit there in the sun and they can make their own food. So what plants have the capability of doing is making their food, and then when they need it, they can break that food down just like animals do for cell respiration. So let's wrap things up tonight, just as a nice introduction. So again, there might be some recognition from what you've done before, maybe not. So here we have our lovely mitochondria. And so the mitochondria have an outer membrane. We have an inner membrane. We have an intermembrane space. And then this inner membrane is highly folded, and the folds form these inner structures called cristae. And that's going to be really important for what's on this inner membrane. Now, there's four major occurrences, although you'll notice that they're only accounting for 3 times for the ATP. So I always learned it as 3 major steps, but there is kind of two-part here in this first one, kind of bridging the first and the second one. So let's go ahead and name these. The first step is glycolysis. And there might be a part of you that's thinking to yourself, oh, not this again. But I promise you, the second time around, you start to remember and the puzzle pieces start coming together. So glycolysis occurs outside on the cytoplasm. If I could write, that would help. And what happens in glycolysis in a very, very quick way, you're going to take glucose and break it down into pyruvate. And pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule. Now, what you get from this, you get 2 NADH and 2 ATP. Now, this pyruvate has to be converted. So this is the conversion of pyruvate to something called acetyl-CoA. And we can talk about what that means tomorrow, but conversions of pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. Now, that's going to go into the Krebs cycle, and notice at this point we are inside the mitochondria. This happens inside the matrix. This is the matrix, this part on the inside, matrix of the mitochondria. Now, the Krebs cycle is where we start to really see the prep, because one thing I hope you catch is this is only 2 ATP. And remember, ATP can release -7 and a bit. So we're only at -14. And remember, glucose has -686. So this is not a lot right now. But what we do in Krebs is we really set the stage. We're going to end up getting 8 NADH, give or take. And I'll talk about what that give or take means. 2 FADH2. And FADH2 is just another version of a dump truck. So it's catching hydrogens and electrons. And then we're down to the electron transport system. This is also called chemiosmosis, or let me maybe restate that. These are all related to each other. Electron transport system, chemiosmosis. And then another word that is sometimes used for this is oxidation, phosphorylation. All right. And then we will start there tomorrow. And I will leave you with a typical human, give or take how active they are, has 2,000 calories per day. And remember, an alligator is cold-blooded. It does not regulate its temperature, so we want to examine maybe how that changes, how much energy they need. Well, hope this helps get you started.